Hello, for today's Targets in Focus, I'm delighted to be joined by Neil Mellor from BNY MELLON. Hi Neil, so today let's concentrate on the euro dollar. Talk me through how you see this currency pair performing in light of all the global issues at the moment.
Well, we think we've seen the euro at highs against the dollar. I mean, we're targeting a rate of around 140 by year end. There can obviously be an awful lot of volatility over the period in the interim. Every currency seems to be blighted one way or the other at the moment, and so more so than ever, it seems to be deciding upon the least ugly currency when you're coming to sort of frame your forecasts. I mean, you could well argue the dollar is the most ugly currency. US fiscal policy and monetary policy aren't exactly conducive to currency strength. And also when you consider that they have this currency policy which has been widely regarded as benign neglect. Again, it's not going to see the dollar well supported going forward, and those policies aren't really going to change much. In fact, we could well see a third bout of quantitative easing. So, as such, the dollar debasement that we've seen over the last 8-9 years is likely to continue. The dollar's problems are going to weigh on it, but it's still, despite all that, it is the outperformer in a risk-off environment. And besides, it is hard to argue when we look at euro dollar that its resilience has been about dollar weakness. Over the past 2 years, certainly, the euro has not been about fundamentals. I think you can also extend that back 8 or 9 years. And I think, I would argue euro strength and euro resilience has all been about reserve diversification by central banks that hoard dollar reserves, principally China, and they just diversify at the margin all these various capital flows, huge capital flows in the case of China, $3 trillion worth of reserves is the total now. And of course that's supported currencies like the euro. So when we do forecast euro dollar, we have to understand China's position as the guardian of this vast pool of reserves. For so long, certainly in the post-crisis era, I mean post-2008, China has been very, very supportive of Eurozone debt. It's been very vocal on that front, but that has begun to change, and literally over the past few weeks, various senior officials appear to have changed their tone on the Eurozone crisis. One example being the foreign minister who was on a trip to Albania recently. He said China is worried about the threat to the various members of the Eurozone, and we heard very similar comments from members of the People's Bank of China's policy board as well. Now, we're not talking about a big shift in tone. China doesn't really do anything quickly. It took about 2 years for China's niggling doubts about the US Treasury market to find their way into a speech by Premier Wen. That was back in 2008. But I think that could just be enough for China to continue looking for alternative currencies, or not just currencies, of course, but resources as well. In fact, that's been explicitly referred to by a number of commentators. It's been very clear over the past 2 to 3 years that China is looking to expand its reserves and expand its exposure to various markets and also sovereign markets as well. Sovereign bonds of South Korea have certainly been talked about in the last couple of months or so. It is difficult to factor in those long-term issues when you're looking at short-term forecasts, but we do think the Eurozone problems as well are destined to blow up again before too long. The Greek economy appears to be sinking, and there is a risk of it taking others down with it, and ultimately I think something has to give. The irony, of course, is that if something like that happened, it could prove to be a euro positive, and that's why I think more than ever there are significant risks attached to any forecast. But I think it is very, very hard to ignore the dominant role of the reserve diversification activities of the likes of China. And as I say, given that it has shown signs of being concerned about what's happening in the Eurozone, I think that will be a key factor going forward, and hence we see a slightly weaker euro by year end.
Thank you, Neil. As always, a pleasure. For more expert analysis on global currencies, stay tuned.